Hi, and welcome to the Business Pioneer Podcast. I'm your host, Erika Montgomery. I'm the founder and CEO of Three Girls Media Inc., an award winning digital marketing agency. Today, I am excited to introduce a visionary leader in architecture and sustainable design, Tessa Bradley, who is the CEO and principal architect of Artisans Group Architecture and Planning. With over 22 years experience in architecture and construction, Tessa has really broken some barriers in a male dominated industry, and she is now leading one of the few 100% women owned architecture firms in the US. Her firm specializes in high performance, energy efficient buildings, alternative project delivery, and socially conscious design, which I love. From sustainable luxury homes to transformative community projects for local tribes and nonprofits, Tessa has been featured in the New York Times, in Architectural Digest, and in Dwell. She lectures nationally on passive house design, which I'm excited to learn more about. So please join us as we explore Tessa's journey, what it takes to lead with innovation and purpose. Tessa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Erica. With that introduction, I feel like I should be more polished. That was great.
I have no doubt you are going to do just wonderfully during this conversation. So, Tessa, tell me a little bit about Artisans Group Architecture and how it got started.
Sure. Well, I came on as a young designer for the Artisans Group, which was a remodeling firm many moons ago in Olympia. And in the original downturn of 2008, I became an owner. And turns out owning 50% of not much is not much. And as we came out of that, me and my then business partner, Randy, who is now retired, we transformed the Artisans Group into a high performance design build firm. So we started doing passive house before it was a thing that people knew about, before it was cool. And we would design and construct those homes. And eventually, Randy retired, and we had a third business partner that eventually me and her bought him out at his retirement. That's my current business partner, Rusa Cassell. She's another sustainable licensed architect like myself. And her and I actually closed the design build firm and opened our just straight architecture firm, would be 4 or 5 years ago at this point. So although we have a long history, we're actually a different company now. And we don't construct anymore, except for ourselves, God help us. And we're just focused on servicing the area with architecture and planning.
Amazing. And when you say passive house design, I think a lot of our viewers are probably unfamiliar with that terminology and what it means. So please go ahead and explain that.
Sure. Well, in layman's terms, we've built houses, essentially the same way for like 60 years, right? Since the advent of insulation, our walls and our assemblies and our homes have essentially not really progressed much in terms of science and in terms of comfort. Passive house is a big step forward, and it's sort of the culmination of the greatest, most cutting edge building science available to us. And in really simple terms, we do thicker assemblies. We wrap the building in a big woolly sweater. We buy better windows and doors, and we have more complex air filtration systems that keep the heat, but keep fresh filtered air coming in all the time, called HRVs or ERVs. So the buildings are more airtight, but the air inside is fresh and filtered. You don't need as big of a heating system because you're wrapped in a big woolly sweater. And so it's a different approach to design and construction, and it yields a home that uses about 75% less energy than a typical home. So the same energy it takes to run a hairdryer could heat a passive house, for example.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And we have a lot more understanding of building science these days, and what makes buildings fail and what makes walls fail and what makes things rot. And so, we're able to avoid a lot of the pitfalls of sick building syndrome and other, less ideal ways to live in buildings.
And I imagine being in the Pacific Northwest, especially as I'm looking outside and there's snow on the ground right now, having a house that stays really warm inside, but the air is good quality is really important.
Yes, and you tend to well, before really we really started to use this approach. You could have a building that was very airtight and very comfortable, but the air quality was bad, or
Mhm.
vice versa. You could have okay air quality, but the building was really leaky and breathing through all of its little holes. Um, and so this is really the best building science available to us, and as a system works really well.
Phenomenal. And do you do mostly residential construction or do you do any commercial construction in the area?
So about half of our firm does residential, and we specialize in passive house, as we just discussed, and also alternative building delivery systems. So like
Mhm.
prefabrication and other better ways to deliver projects. The other half of our firm is really focused on large scale work. So we work with the very amazing local tribes. For medical clinics and school projects and housing at a much larger scale. And so we incorporate the building science of passive house into every project that we do, depending on the goals of the project at different scale.
How did you get started in architecture?
That's a great question, Erica. My dad was a local teacher. So he taught at SPSCC, the local community college. He taught drafting for over 35 years. So I grew up with my dad having a drafting table and eventually a computer in our living room. And he always worked two jobs. So I always taught at the college and then worked for developers and architects in town, things like that, doing drafting on the side. So I had a lot of exposure to construction and design from a really early age.
That's exciting that you were exposed to it so young and then you decided to stick with it. And I think, as I mentioned in your intro, there are so few architectural firms that are women run. What's it like to be a woman in a male dominated industry?
It's interesting. I don't know what it's like to not be a woman in our industry, of course. So it's like kind of an odd question if you think about it in those terms. But we definitely we represent less than 1% of the architecture firms in the country. So less than 1% of architecture firms are owned by women. And I just remember early in my career that I didn't even meet a female licensed architect until I was already on the path to licensure myself.
Hmm.
So there was a real lack of representation. I think I was one of maybe three women in my even just my drafting program that I did originally. Um, and I just found that when I worked other firms, there was no representation. There was no management that looked like me. And then there also just didn't like people wouldn't get promoted and no one would be overt about it. It would be like, well, I just didn't think they were as qualified as their male counterpart. Sort
Mm.
of that really um, insidious discomfort. Uh, and so, I think in forming our firm, we really made an opportunity for ourselves that no one was going to give us. And that we can now give to predominantly our female and queer and people of color staff who tend to gravitate towards our firm. We can really give them opportunities they just might not have, in any other way in our
That's
in our field.
amazing. That's fantastic. And tell me a little bit about what you love about design.
I think that if you're attracted to design, you're attracted to puzzles. There's a real puzzle aspect to what we do, fitting someone's program into a building and arranging it in a way that's sensical and is going to work, trying to think about all the ways that buildings have to do things and have to function well, and then trying to create this visual narrative, this aesthetic theory, essentially creating an experience or a painting or a piece of art that has to do a bunch of functions. And
Mhm.
so I think for those people that are that little Venn diagram of like, I love art, I love science, I'm like practical, but also a dreamer, there's this little overlap in the middle that makes good architects. And I think it's the puzzling. You can't let it go. You have to solve the puzzle.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a great combination of art and science.
For sure.
Yeah. So, how long have you been in business now?
The Artisans Group has been in business over 20 years. We've been doing pure architecture and planning and not construction for, I believe, five.
Okay. And how have things changed over the last, say, 5 years since you've been in your position?
We really scaled up our company from not having as much of a commercial presence as in the beginning. We had a really strong residential portfolio and had won lots of, high-end custom, high-performance residential kinds of awards and things like that. But at this point, we've really shown our local community and the clients we've had that we can do large-scale work, plan. I'm doing a $50 million neighborhood for Habitat for Humanity. That's a huge neighborhood planning project.
Wow.
We can do land use and complex permitting issues, and do really large scale buildings. We've really proven that in the last few years. And that's the other thing is in architecture, it's very easy to sort of let the overlay of gender roles sort of presume that we would be a small scale firm, that we would only do residential work, that we would like be more interested in interior design. Like there's all these sort of assumptions that come along with being a female led and female owned firm. And we've really focused hard on, really proving that we can do large scale architecture and we can do it really well.
That's amazing. And how has the industry as a whole changed over the last 5 or 10 years? What's new in architecture?
I would say that there is a growing contingent of architects that really want to do measurably better buildings. There's a lot of greenwashing that sort of presents the idea that doing buildings the same way we have for the last 100 years is a good idea.
Hmm.
And I think depending on the person you're working for's goals, if someone's just going to flip a building and it's a short turnaround, maybe it's harder to get them interested in some sustainability. But a lot of developers, a lot of investors are planning to hold buildings now and have to maintain them themselves, and the longevity, the resiliency. What if we just learned from those horrible California fires, that building buildings with a more resilient future can actually be the difference between a good investment and a poor investment.
Mm.
And so, I think that is resonating a lot more in architecture than it did even 10 years ago. And, in our case, interest in the kind of work we do has, increased exponentially because we were sort of a niche firm, but now we're positioned to really be experts at the thing that perhaps everyone wants. So I think that has worked out well for us.
That's fantastic. And where do you see things going in the future? What's next for architecture?
I think much like the ways that we've seen it interest shape and reform, I think that resiliency is a really big piece of our future.
Hmm.
To build buildings that are less dependent on a really stressed electrical grid, to build buildings that can withstand superstorms and wildfires and changing energy economics and things like that. I think really will be what makes buildings be very valuable or less valuable in the long run, not just in terms of money, but in terms of the human experience of those buildings too.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let me ask you a little bit about the business. How do you market yourselves? There's obviously other architecture firms in the area that you compete against. So what do you do to market your business?
That's a great question. So it kind of depends on what piece of business we're selling and we're working on. The residential side, we have such a strong portfolio that we don't have as much competition locally for that. So we sort of are the high end and custom residential firm. And no one really has our experience with high performance. So if you're at all interested in a home that's more sustainable than, code, people typically sort of get funneled to us. We've always offered interior design, but we're really doubling down on that this year and growing the department, in that, people want a really high touch architecture service and they really just want to roll into a really high touch interior design process. And so we are really bulking up that side of our services to give people a more streamlined experience. And we're great at it. We do a good job. Like I said, we're a women owned firm. Why not do what everyone expects us to do? We'll do great interiors. But, interiors are really fun because we do a lot of restaurants and hospitality and cafes, things of that nature. And so
Nice.
those are really fun projects to engage with the public in that way. So all of that work we just collect because our portfolio is really strong. When it comes to the larger scale and commercial work, that has to do with larger pre-positioning strategies. So creating relationships with the decision makers around, the tribal work, the medical clinics, other community-based projects, pre-positioning with cities to try and win their work. All of that requires sort of a grander, longer term strategy. And so we're a couple of years into like a 6-year strategy on that, and it's going well.
That's fantastic. And can you name drop it all in terms of maybe some of the local cafes or restaurants that you've designed if any of our viewers are in the area and want to stop in and see your work?
Oh, I would love to. So we did the 222 Market, which is a very popular hub of several small businesses, and we're actually in the process of designing a new space for them right now. We do all the Olympia coffees, which of course
Oh,
are the most amazing cafes in the world. Their coffee is incredible. And gosh, now I'm blanking. We work with a lot of small businesses and restaurants. Those would probably be the two most notable I would mention.
okay, fantastic. I definitely have been to several Olympia coffees and they're beautiful buildings.
Yeah, and it's fun because they are always opening more locations. I think we've done 6 or 7 for them at this point, and they're
Nice.
always have a really strong visual narrative and a really great theme.
Yeah.
They have really exquisite taste in addition to being the most amazing coffee ever.
Yeah, the coffee is absolutely fantastic, which is why I keep going back for sure. Yeah,
Same.
yeah. And so let's get back to your marketing for a minute. How much does social media factor into your marketing efforts?
That is a question I ask myself often. We we have one of my employees does an amazing job of managing our social media.
Hmm.
And so we put a degree of effort into it. We have not leaned into sort of the cultural expectation that we be like Instagram stars or that we be, like personalities. That's a tack that a lot of firms, small firms particularly can take. But we're really, it doesn't appeal to me and my co-principal as much. And so what we've tried to keep ours, which can be a downfall, is we kind of have a little bit more of a professional and generic voice to like our Instagram and such things, where we're
Hmm.
really relying on the quality of the work we're photographing and the projects that we're promoting.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know if that's like, to be honest, Erica, I don't know if that's a great long-term strategy, but it seems to coincide with our principles and um, wanting to be really good at our jobs, not popular at our jobs.
Hmm.
So I don't know how that's going to work out long term, but that's been our strategy so far. I'd love your thoughts. I mean, you're an expert on these things, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that you definitely can stay true to your brand on social media and people want authenticity. I think that's key. So, I don't think you need to try to be something or someone you're not on social media. And that would absolutely be a detriment. So, staying true to your voice, your own, personality. It's not about being a star, like you said, it's about being authentic. I think will serve you really well.
Well, thank you. Then I'm going to stick with it because that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. Good choice. Good choice. I back you 100% in that regard. And what about email marketing? Do you employ any kind of like any newsletter or anything like that?
We do have a newsletter. We tend to only send it out maybe twice a year.
Hmm.
So we happen to be, me and my co-principal Rusa and our respective life partners are self-developing a new office for ourselves right now. And it's an exciting project in that it's certified passive house and it is a big new office for us on the main floor right in front of our existing office in Tumwater. But it's got 6 net zero energy apartments above it. So
Wow.
there's no project like it for 60 miles in any direction, and it's very you don't see this high performance technology applied as often to a mixed use building,
Hmm.
and so it's a very innovative project in that way. And so we've sent out an update around the holidays about that. We'll probably send out another one when we do our grand opening this spring. But we tend to kind of keep the newsletters for big news, new hires, new services, big self-development project, that sort of thing. But I do think it can be nice to reach those that aren't on social media, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because believe it or not, not everybody is on social media these days. And, when it comes to email marketing, it's a great, really cost effective way to stay top of mind with your audience, right? On a regular basis. So,
We try to not abuse it because I know I don't like receiving a lot of emails. So we try to just send like 2 a year.
yeah, and I definitely think they can be overdone for sure. But, sending something out even quarterly, I don't think is too much, or even, once a month or something, just to stay top of mind and kind of let people know what's going on with you or the firm or new projects you've got going on and stuff like that, I think is perfectly acceptable and definitely not overkill.
Well, quarterly is the dream, Erica. I feel like we shoot for quarterly and we manage to get to maybe 2 a year. So
There you
someday,
go.
someday I'll actually do quarterly newsletters.
There you go. Yeah, good going, good going. So, if people want to find you, how can they go about finding your business? Give me the website address and where you're physically located.
So we are physically located in Tumwater, 6504 Capitol Boulevard South. We're kitty corner to Egan's, which has fabulous burgers,
Yes.
and it's definitely too close to our office for comfort. And our website is www.artisansgroup.com. And we do have a really rich and full portfolio of finished projects of every scale and, renderings of ones in progress. And so that's a great way to see our work and, read a little bit about our philosophies and our sort of casual, welcoming company culture. I think a lot of people are intimidated to hire an architect, and I think we get a lot of work because we just want to be good partners and be good listeners and be your friendly neighborhood architect to help you out.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be intimidating. I think it all comes down to, who you're talking to, being able to build that relationship, feel comfortable with the person, get your questions answered. And it sounds to me like you do a great job of that.
Thank you. Yeah, we certainly try. We employ a lot of really amazing people. Our team is really incredible, and so it's pretty easy to promise a good project.
Fantastic. So, for our entrepreneurs and business owners that are listening, any advice that you would like to leave them with?
Let's see. The things I'm thinking about lately are I see a lot of firms lean one of two ways, I feel like. One is they won't lay a plan in place and then stick with it long enough to know if it's working. So, like, the ability to do a hard thing repeatedly is key to succeeding in small business. And then the other key I see is don't spend all of your time visioning and planning. Spend 95% of your time doing. So, I think that there's like a really difficult line to navigate of picking a really strong strategy, sticking with it, and spending your time doing the strategy instead of constantly revising or reimagining the strategy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Our guest has been Tessa Bradley with the Artisans Group architecture firm. Tessa, thank you so much for being a guest on today's show.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you, Erica. It was fun.
You bet. Have a great day.
You too.